Your martial arts movie podcast.
I threw that shit before I walked in the room.
Featuring drunken Thai boxer Will.
Too bad you will die.
The also drunken wrestler Mark.
I said I don't want trouble.
And drunken karate master Zero.
You've lost your balls.
And now,
Tall. I know Kung Fu.
You know, baby.
Fists of Fail.
I love this title. Baby Assassins is a bubbly action crime comedy that's not afraid to kick a lot of ass. That's not really how I feel about this movie at all. So that headline that I'm reading right now, I don't know what movie they watched. We're talking about Baby Assassins today, and I don't know. Am I in the minority here? Like, I don't feel like I watched the same movie as other people have, because I'm seeing pretty positive reviews for the film.
So I completely understand your sentiments, because I watched this first. So this is technically came out in 2021. We got it here in the U.S. I believe last month in July, because of Haya picked it up. The Haya streaming service, and I gave it a watch, and I liked aspects of it, but oh boy, does the middle grinds to a halt. It just drags so much. It is so slow, and unfortunately they don't put any action in the middle when this is kind of an action-y martial arts movie. So you're just left with these characters who I do feel are acted correctly. Like I think the actresses did a really great job at portraying these kind of weird, quirky girls but it feels like they might be on the spectrum. There's definitely some there's some inconsistencies with them in how they are not really normal functioning members of society, and I think they're portrayed in an interesting way, but oh boy, the story that they decided to tell with them is not that engaging, unfortunately.
All right, let me take a crack at the story, all right, because It's actually super simple.
Oh god, it's really simple.
It's incredibly simple. Two teenage girls are assassins. Okay, well, that's like the first sentence. The second sentence is they need to get part-time jobs so that they can keep their anonymity, I guess. Well, it's kind of forced upon them that they need to get these part-time jobs, and they are rooming with one another. I thought the movie was just going to be based off of that, based off what you told me, what the film was going to be about. And then there's, I thought that sounds boring as a standalone. It could be interesting, but the way that the movie does it, I don't know. I never found it too engaging. I see what they're trying to do, with all these scenes that kind of drag on. Not drag on, but they spend a lot of time on these scenes that feel like a slice of life for these two characters.
Slice of life is like the perfect way to describe it, because you really are just there with these two girls in real time. As they are being roommates together, they are doing these innocuous kind of irrelevant things before, maybe not even before, while they are not being the quote-unquote assassins. Yeah. And this could work, I think, maybe if they took out the assassins part. If this was just a bunch of quirky little girls doing their own thing, learning to get along together and befriend each other and help each other out, because it is very clear in the movie that there is something off about them. They are not socially adept, and this is kind of why they need to be assassins, because they can't function in these part-time jobs that they're trying to get as well. Like, that's very evident in the movie.
Yeah, and I know what the movie's trying to do with a lot of that. They're trying to play up a lot of the comedy. Because it's a quirky kind of gimmick, I guess, with the story. It's like, oh, well, these socially inept assassins are trying to live like normal people, and there's so much of the movie that, like, when I say so much, I mean like a vast 90% of the movie that is spent on time like that, where things don't really progress. It feels like, okay, that scene was kind of pointless, and the comedy isn't so strong enough that I gotta say, I kind of wish this movie either took away all the action, or this could have worked a lot better if it was an anime. Because as I was watching it, I thought, this is awkward because it's live action. So a lot of this I feel like would work a lot better if it was animation. Like a lot of the jokes would probably land better. You can get
maybe they would do like visual gags or something.
Visual gags,
or
exactly.
They would go to maybe these chibi versions when they're being.
Well, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. It's realistic in the portrayal of how awkward and strange these girls are, and I think so when I was rewatching this, I was thinking, I think this is going to be really hard for an older audience to latch onto these characters.
Well, that's us, because we're old people.
Yeah, we're older. But I can understand it, because when I was younger, I was socially awkward, and I could definitely empathize with a lot, some of the things that the one character was going through, and how she was more quiet and reserved and didn't know how to really speak out. So I could really, really relate to that kind of stuff. It's the fact that this is still kind of billed as an action movie, and
that's false advertising.
Kind of. It's an action sandwich. We only get fights in the beginning and the end. The whole time, at least the first time I first watched it, I was waiting for that plateau to kind of come back up. So we are in the valley where we're just spending time with these characters, and I was waiting for the moment when something was going to happen to kind of drag me back in. Mm-hmm. Because yes, it's good to spend time with the characters and get to know them and get to like them in any sort of movie, but then you need to do something where you kind of like them even more, maybe put them in danger or give them some sort of emotional stakes or physical stakes, because this is an action movie, and it never happens for them. So I think it might be a disservice that the marketing is heavily leaning into the action. I mean, I understand why they did, but I don't know what to do in that case. Like, how do you escalate the fact that this really isn't an action movie, but only in certain parts?
Well, I get why. I completely understand why we want to market this movie as a martial arts extravaganza or action extravaganza. It gets more butts in the seats, but sure. But you say what you will about, maybe it is false advertising, maybe it isn't, it gets people's attention to the movie. When the action does happen, it's very fleeting, but it's pretty good for the most part. But yeah, that 90% of the movie, from the 9.5 minute mark to an hour and 20 minutes in, there isn't a single minute of action. And, so it quite literally, the thinnest loaves of bread, that's
action bread.
Yeah, exactly. It is so thin, just sandwiching this movie where not enough content is happening in the middle. So whatever, I get that, the marketing ploy, but what I don't understand are all the reviews that are being very overly positive for this film. That I don't get.
Well, you might just be cynical.
I definitely am. I'm a very skeptical person, but and we are martial arts enthusiasts, movies especially. So we've seen a lot. Watching this movie is wow, this is super scamp. There's not enough content in this to really hold my engagement.
I think that's the problem. There's not enough martial arts content, or in the middle of the movie, they don't really engage us enough. Yeah. So there is a moment in the movie where the pacing just kind of loses me, because I can be totally fine with a slow-paced slice of life piece of storytelling, and for the most part in the beginning I was okay with it. I was fine with really being there in real time with these girls as they're just sitting on their couch interacting with each other. There is a charming awkwardness to their interactions, and I think the actresses sell that really well. Yeah. But what ends up happening is once we get to the maid cafe stuff, that's where the movie just really takes a nosedive, because I start to realize that for me anyways, when you really start to realize, okay, there's really no action anymore. And now we start to go into a bit more of the C plot. Mm-hmm. So the C plot of this movie, well, maybe it's not the C plot, I guess the B plot.
There's another plot.
Yeah, there's another plot. Is there are Yakuza who get involved, and I believe what happens...
One of the Yakuza member gets killed by the assassins, and the remaining Yakuza, which include like this guy and his two children as in like full-grown adults, children, they all three of them are trying to find the assassins, the lead characters, essentially. And see, that's what, okay, like, just to go back to what I was trying to say before, I thought this was going to be that little C plot that you mentioned that would make the story more interesting. It kind of, it's like they set it up and they set up the pins, and it's just like striked out every single time, like, it's like, oh my god, what happened? Like, it's not interesting at all. And the way that they execute it just feels like, a bunt.
Yeah, unfortunately, the whole Yakuza plot really falls apart, and it seems like they are going to be a threat, because they are on the trail of hunting down these baby assassins. Title drop. And what happens is the daughter of the Yakuza lead actually captures one of the baby assassins. And
she does nothing with it.
She does nothing with her. They knock her out, and they steal her gun, and that's it. That's where the movie started to lose me a little bit, because I didn't understand why they made that story choice. And then it's from there, that's when they changed the plot to the maid cafe stuff, and oh god, all that maid cafe stuff was
that. How long do you think that scene is?
It goes on for a while.
Yeah, it goes on so long. I get what they're trying to do. I mean, it builds tension, and it all culminates to one of the assassins assassinating, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's just like meandering buildup. It's like, okay, I get it. Like, it's gonna escalate to a point, but it doesn't feel like, or at least the way I felt watching it, especially the second time. Like, okay, this is going nowhere. Like, the tension building isn't done very well. It just feels like the scene's just going on way too long.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I know what they were doing in the maid cafe stuff. So basically what happens is these girls are trying to get jobs. They're trying to get part-time jobs because that's what their agency, quote-unquote agency, is having them do. They keep on getting fired because they're kind of incompetent. They're very violent or aggressive.
Violent, yes.
Yeah. And so one of the girls is a little more talkative, a little more girly and outwardly. So she actually does well at being one of these maids at a Japanese maid cafe. And if you don't know what a Japanese maid cafe is, that's basically where these women dress up in cute maid outfits. They act like you are their masters, and they speak to you in a way that's very overtly positive and very, very flirty and loving to the patrons. And I don't remember where I was going with this.
You're just fantasizing about the last time you went to one.
Actually, I did go to a maid cafe when I visited Tokyo a few years ago. And the movie, I mean, it captures it correctly. The women are overtly nice to you. They treat you like you're this lord, this king. Yep. They talk to you in a very cutesy manner. But I don't understand Japanese without subtitles, so I don't know what the hell any of them were saying.
Well, I'm glad that they captured the authenticity of maid cafes in this movie, because now it gets a glowing praise from me.
Right. Oh, okay. So I remember I was going with the maid cafe stuff. So one of the girls is a little more social than the other.
And the
other girl, she is so socially awkward, and she's put into a job where your main role is to be verbal and talkative and outgoing. So they start to put this wedge, this divide between the girls because of that. And story-wise, sure, that makes sense. But as an action fan, I was just speechless because at this point I start to realize, oh no, we're not going to get action until the very end now because we need to resolve this new story point.
Yeah, see, I'm kind of on the same boat as you. Like, I don't mind slow burn movies. I don't even mind action sandwiches for the most part. You know, like movies where there's just barely sprinklings of action. But by the time we get to them, I want to feel like this was worth the wait, right? Or like this feels like it was everything was a boiling point, and then like we've crossed that threshold. Like we're finally. It's a culmination of all that conflict that we've had,
yes,
in terms of story, and now we've gotten here. This movie fails in that aspect. Like by the time we finally get action, my thought process is like we could have just skipped the whole movie to get to this point. Like there nothing added anything. Like nothing about the story added to this final fight scene that we have. And then, yeah, like we said before, there's only 2 fight scenes in the movie. And one of them is a dream sequence.
Yeah, that kind of confused me, why she was dreaming about killing these
shop owners,
convenience store employees. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't understand that, but sure, why not?
Yeah,
and then the final fight between one of the assassins is with a character who is in the movie very, very briefly, but he's not the main antagonist. They kind of deal with the main antagonist in a completely different way.
Holy crap. That's so anticlimactic, the way that they killed the main villain.
Yeah, so we have our main character fighting somebody who isn't, there's no really personal stakes besides the fact that, he's a good fighter, she needs to take him out. I don't know, he should have been the Yakuza boss, right? He should have been the ringleader. He should have been the one pulling the string. So at least he feels like he legitimately feels like the main bad guy.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about the action from a general standpoint, and we will break down the 2 scenes slightly a little later on. But like just to talk about the acting, or like the way that the non-action is, all those hour and 15 minutes of not like just dialogue and like non-action happening. A lot of those shots are just these long takes.
Yeah,
very long takes, and static camera, just seeing these actors move across the room. Sometimes just sitting there for a solid 3 minutes at a time, just not moving, just talking. And I mean, a part of me finds it impressive. That like, they hit all their marks, they're hitting all their line deliveries. But the other side of me is thinking this is visually uninteresting. Yeah. And a vast majority of the movie is like that. Like we have a lot of these static shots of like just watching someone walk down the hallway, and like in real time, or like things are happening in real time, like I mentioned, like you mentioned before. So a lot of it is slow. Like that's another reason why I didn't find a lot of the story very interesting. And like, yeah, like why I said that this would probably work better as an anime is that we could probably have more visual, like variety.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of the comedy could have like probably been elevated with all the chibi-ness, I guess, because this felt very much like in line with that kind of comedy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't mind that it's in live action because this feels like I do want to commend the acting. Saori Izawa and Akari Takaishi. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I again, like I thought they were great in portraying these really quirky, weird little high school girls who are socially inept and they're stuck living together, and it's kind of cute seeing them just sit on the couch and just play Nintendo Switch or read manga. It's like we're there with them. And I think if I think this could really appeal to a younger generation because I feel like I know younger people who just do that. They just sit together,
Yeah.
they sit on the couch, and they might feel a little more sympathetic to this type of story or this type of storytelling. Like, oh, I can relate to these girls because that's what I do too. But then again, just like you realize that the story isn't really going anywhere. I mean, it's the story goes to a place to create conflict between the girls. I just don't like how they do it. And
Oh, absolutely not.
the way they do it is they go to this maid cafe, and I just don't like any of that stuff going on.
Yeah, one of them discovers, oh, I'm super introverted, and the other one's not. So now we're gonna have a bickering. We're gonna have basically be at odds. And I knew that the movie was gonna go that route. I mean, we've been kind of setting it up slowly, But then by the time they resolve it, I don't know how the fuck they resolved it. They just get to a scene where like, let's not hate each other anymore. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It just felt very forced. Like by the time we get to that point, so I don't know.
She needed to apologize because the movie needed to get them together on their good sides again,
Yeah.
so that they can go to the last final action scene and defeat the bad guys. Yeah. We didn't get to dwell in sort of any thought behind the girl wanting to apologize. She just does. So
Yeah. So I mean, I don't really know if we need to spoil the movie. I mean, the movie's really, really straightforward. Like the whys, the literal why on how the reasoning why the characters get to the final fight scene. It doesn't even really matter. Like you could watch the movie and you'll get it, but it doesn't really matter at that point because the movie is just pretty straightforward for the most part. You'll understand why unless you're only a couple minutes into the film. But let's talk about the action because that guy you mentioned before, who takes on I'm gonna butcher her name.
Masanori Mimoto.
Yeah, who takes on Sayori Izawa, the awkward introverted one,
The blonde
with the blonde
girl.
hair. I'll just call her Sayori for the rest of this review.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have Masanori Mimoto, like you mentioned, and the action direction is Kensuke Sanamura.
Yeah.
We talked about him.
Both were in Hydra. We spoke about this film last year. Very
Alien versus Ninja.
Also,
Don't
Alien
forget.
versus Ninja, but Hydra is. I was speaking very highly of it because I do believe that the choreography that they came up with in that film was setting a new standard for martial arts choreography.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's not hyperbole at all. I think that's some of the best action choreography I've seen in a very long time. Like innovative action choreography. Yeah, I think that. The first and last fight. I mean, since it is Kensuke Sanamura's action direction, it's okay. You get some of that, but like the last fight, I think it's because Mimoto is in it. It kind of has that Hydra-esque like action choreography, especially since a lot of it is close range, and a lot of it is groundwork and keeping things dynamic and interesting. It doesn't quite hit the same mark as Hydra though. Like Hydra, definitely did a lot better. And hey, as much as like we're talking badly about this movie, I look back on Hydra and I think that movie was also a super simple story. It only had 2 fights, so like why does that movie work whereas this one kind of doesn't for me?
Right. Yeah, I was thinking of Hydra a lot as well because those exact same reasons. I think Hydra stands out a little more just because the fights are definitely much better.
Yeah.
In Hydra, they're much longer and they're a little more. They're a lot more complicated. And I do remember feeling the length though in Hydra as well. I remember thinking like, okay, where is this going? Like,
but that movie's super short.
It is
only
super
like
short.
70 minutes or
yeah.
not
I mean,
even.
this movie. This is 90 minutes. They could have chopped off maybe like 20 minutes of this movie.
I think 30.
Yeah.
This story aside, whatever, all the complaints aside, the first fight is okay. It really just shows off Sayori Izawa, doing a lot of her own choreography, which I do commend her for.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to say too. She is very short, a very short woman. So I think it would have been difficult to find a double for her unless they found like a really thin, short man and put him in a blonde wig. I believe this is really her doing all of the fighting,
like all of it, right?
Because she was also a stunt person in other Japanese movies. I just recently saw.
Okay.
So I'm pretty positive this is her. So when you see her fight Masamori Mimoto at the end, it makes that feel even more special because like she's able to keep up with him, who I like hold in really, really high regards after seeing Hydra. And I haven't really seen her work, so the fact that she is so much smaller and they're able to still make the choreography interesting and fast and use like her size advantage to him, I was just like really surprised at what they did with it. Right.
It's funny. Last year, right, we covered Hydra.
Yes.
It was a dual episode where we covered Snake Eyes, right?
Yeah.
Sayori Izawa was a stunt double in Snake Eyes.
Oh, right. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, that's interesting. But like she does a phenomenal job. I mean, like especially at the end, the last fight with her versus Mimoto, that's a great fight. I do like this one a lot. It kind of suffers from what is unfortunately it suffers in the way that it ends. It just ends kind of bleh. Yeah, I would agree. I wasn't crazy about how she defeats the final boss Mimoto, but it goes along with everything we've complained about in the past about fight scenes. Like if a main character or protagonist or just a character is losing a fight, you want to root for them. You want them to win either through, I don't know, like just like learning a new strategy or
pulling out a gun.
Yeah, basically. No, that's not what you shouldn't do. Yes, that's what you shouldn't do. But that's quite literally how the fight ends. It's like, oh my god, there was so much momentum in this fight. Like, why you gotta end it this way?
Right. It doesn't feel like the fight ended correctly. It doesn't feel like she outsmarted the villain in any way, or learned some new tactic, or even powered up, thought of something in her montage sequence. No, none of that happens. There's no montage sequence in this movie either. So
she remembered all the time she had instant ramen throughout the movie,
right?
Or it was like hot pot or something like that. There's nothing at the end, unfortunately, and I guess that's part of the reason why we probably aren't going to do a Patreon section for this episode.
We can't really. There's not enough to break down.
But I mean, I will say, like, if there's anything, like maybe we could break down the two action scenes just to some degree. I mean, if we're talking about I'll talk about the first fight scene, which is technically it doesn't even happen in the movie. It's a dream sequence because she is daydreaming during this job interview that what if the person who's hiring me was a mark, and I have to kill him now. And then she goes outside, and all his employees are trying to kill her now. It's not bad. I like the first portion of this where she's kind of just dogpiled, and they're just lifting her up and just basically just like huddle around her.
I do like that part too. So I kind of mentioned this earlier. She's very short. And all her opponents in the movie are tall men. Yeah. So I like the thought process behind the design of the fights. We can easily overpower this girl. They literally do because she's so much shorter. And they're just literally picking her up because what she is doing is she is violently and ferociously just stabbing at them. So they think that maybe, let's just overpower her, let's just dogpile her, let's just pick her up. But what they don't realize is like, she's just stabbing us in the back now while she's getting raised. And so like that makes sense to me that she's just aggressively stabbing at them because she's she doesn't have the weight advantage.
Yeah. But yeah, I like that it basically becomes multiple people trying to just grapple her and just like toss her, like basically hoist her up like a I don't know, like a rag doll, I guess. But she's just violently like attacking them with her knife, which is weird because like they all have knives. How come she's the only one stabbing at them? Right. Yeah, and then like I did notice all the digital blood work. Wasn't a fan of that, but like I let it slide because the movie doesn't have the biggest budget. Yeah, but so whatever to that. When she gets to the fight with, so basically she kills everyone in the room except this one guy who just happens to be, I don't know, drinking tea or something in the corner, and like becomes a one-on-one fight with the two of them. And this one's okay. Like I like the part where they get down the aisle and they're basically on their backs and they're basically fighting for the knife. The knife in his hand. She basically has his back and he just tries to stab up and he's basically pushing his legs. It's very hard to describe this. He's like pushing his legs towards her, so he's basically, they're both sliding towards the
refrigerator
fridge.
in the back.
Yeah. And while he has a knife pointed at her, I thought that was interesting, but yeah, overall, I don't think that this fight was too spectacular, especially when you compare it to the second fight.
Yeah. Well, actually, again, going back to her size, the moment before she kind of delivers the final blow, I like that because this guy is so much taller than her, she really can duck underneath him, and he's trying to stab and swipe at her with a knife, and she's so fast and nimble, she can really just kind of encircle him while still like being so up close with him.
Yeah,
like sliding underneath his legs. Like it looks kind of fun. It reminds me of children's fight choreography because of the size similarities. But obviously, because she is an adult, she has the adeptness and speed. She can pull it off a lot nicer than if a child actor could do that.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because this is not indicative of the movie at all. This ends at the 9-minute mark, and then you don't get anything until an hour 20 minutes into the film.
Oh my god! Yeah.
An hour and 20. Yeah, an hour and 20. Oh my god! Yeah.
There are like brief glimpses of exchange, like hand exchanges throughout the film. Like she has a brief altercation with her roommates, and they kind of do some hand movements. Oh god! So this was really, really disappointing. They're in part of the Yakuza plot. They're trying to find out where these assassins are, and they start just kidnapping random people. And so they find this one guy, and they say, "Okay, we'll let you go if you can beat Masamori Mimoto in a fight." And I was like, "Oh, finally! That's Masamori Mimoto. That's his first. I believe that's one of his first appearances in the film."
Yeah.
And they get into this parking lot. The guy starts raging up, trying to psych himself out, or psych himself up. And he charges at Masamori Mimoto, who just slaps him, and he falls to the ground. And I thought, no, God, because that was, I believe that was like the 30-minute mark. That's when you start to weave in some action, because
of course,
this is an action movie. We're getting that lull of action. You need to kind of bring us back to remind us what we, paid some money for.
Well, it would definitely make the character seem more menacing than he actually is. I mean, yeah, he is like the right-hand man, and he's a expert martial artist. Right?
Yeah, you want to show that, you want to at least give us a glimpse of his skills so we know what we're up against at the end. And to have him fight a guy who can just be slapped out of the way doesn't give us any indication of his skills. So why do we care that he's potentially a mini boss or the final boss, right?
Yeah. We knew that he was going to show up at the very end, right? So there's some gun battle stuff that happens at the very end. The two assassins are just gunning everyone down. We get like this little psych out moment where it looks like the two of them are going to have to fight this one fighter who he goes into fighting stance, and what's her name?
Saori.
Saori, yeah, just kicks him in the balls, spins around him, and the other one just shoots him to death. And I don't. I see what the comedy moment is, like that, what the gimmick is, but I kind of booed at the screen.
Yeah,
I boo! I want some fighting. God damn it!
We're at like the hour.
An hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, we're at the
or an hour and 10
minute
maybe.
mark, and this is how you start the action. Like, no, don't. Like, you've teased us along for so much now that you just give us what we want.
Right. Like you've been teasing us this entire time. Like, you might as well just give us the full blown action. Some of the gunfighting stuff is okay. There's one really good shot of them doing John Wick-esque. I hate that John Wick has become like the benchmark coinage for the term.
It is very visually indicative that they are emulating the John Wick tactical style. And that's not a bad thing. Because I do like tactical action. It's the way you separate, your movie from John Wick is generally how it's shot and how it's edited, though.
Right. And I do like, I don't love all the gunfighting in this movie. What little there is in the film. Like at least the camera stays dynamic for the most part, so it does kind of make the action look a little bit more frenetic, and that's very true when we get to the actual fight. So Masanori appears out of the corner, around the corner, and just takes, grabs at or starts attacking Saori, and they basically have an exchange. He's almost clinching her while she has this gun, and she's just wildly shooting at the air.
Yeah. I mean, I thought was interesting. Her, yeah. Mm-hmm. I like this form of gun fu. This is like gun kata, very similar to Equilibrium, but this doesn't look as cheesy because you don't have the circular swaying arms.
Yeah,
you don't have Saori putting the gun to his face and then him kind of like slapping it out of the way. Yeah. This is more. He has her in the clinch. And he keeps on kind of encircling her and moving her arm out of the way, so the gun is just missing him. Like this feels like more tactical and more realistic than what like Equilibrium does. But Equilibrium, that's a very visual, different language.
Well, that movie is very stylized, and it's kind of hokey and cheesy because of that, but for the most part, I'd still have that movie has a fond place in my heart for how cheesy that is. It's just
they're trying to do something visually different with that movie. Like I just use that as a comparison because when I say gun kata, a lot of times that is the movie that kind of coined that term.
Yeah. And for the most part, when they have the gun versus grappler portion of this, I thought it was interesting because this guy is only evading the gunfire because he is quite literally just
grappling her,
running circles around her, and just tossing to the floor and he eventually gets the gun away from her by just backwards wheelbarrowing her. And the rest of, not the whole thing, but some of this devolves to she is trying to get the gun and he is preventing her from getting it, and once she's kind of settled with not using the gun, that's when the actual fighting really takes place. But unfortunately, the way it ends is kind of upsetting because it's just like, nope, we're gonna go back to the gun after all, and it's like I kind of wanted her to win, not fair and square, but using her wits and her martial art ability.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it's a shame because the whole fight is setting up that she is barely able to keep up with him. Like, she is a very skilled fighter, but he's so much taller, he's so much more powerful, and he definitely has the skill. Yeah. And you can see, like, she is kind of evading his moves, she's kind of able to keep up with him, but he just has the upper hand so many times, and at points, like, she is just getting pelted with these really quick jabs as she is like desperately, like, holding up her forearms and her fists to her face to try and defend.
It's actually upsetting from a story standpoint too, because before we get to the maid cafe, scene, we kind of set her up as always training, or she does training every once in a while, far more than the other character. So when we get to this final fight, it's like, oh, she's not completely useless, but she is so less effective than the opponent that's like, oh, come on.
Well, I don't mind that. I'm glad that they set this precedence for their power level, because if she just steamrolled him and was just so much better.
Oh no, I wasn't expecting steamrolling, but I wanted her to eventually be like, okay, maybe I just need to apply this technique, or like learned his styles to fight back.
Yeah, well, the issue is we only see glimpses of her training. We don't get any sort of semblance of her maybe having some sort of special move or some special maneuver that would be a callback later, because the way she defeats him, and we can elaborate on that a little later, but the way she defeats him is extremely anticlimactic.
Yeah. And I not to detract from all the things I actually like about the fighting, there's a lot of good boxing in this fight. Well, holy crap. Well, this is what I think of when I think of boxing choreography that's actual choreography and isn't just a drama-ridden fight scene where you cut back to onlookers watching the fight.
You're taking...
I'm talking about every sports drama.
You're taking a jab at American boxing movies.
What was that other movie we just talked about?
Born to Defense.
Born to Defense, yeah. As soon as it became a boxing movie, it's like, all right, well, we're just going to start adapting American action movie tropes. But no, the boxing's really good. They're ducking, weaving, and they're, especially when they get pinned up against the wall and they start fighting there. Like, wow, that the choreography is really good here, and it's very fast and fluid, which is good from both the performers too. Like Sayori does a really good job here. But yeah, of course, the standout is Masanori. He's just so fucking fast. Holy crap! Like I can't actually believe like he's as fast as he actually is. Like he looks like he hasn't slipped up at all since Hydra. Like he looks like he's still at the top of his game right now.
Oh yeah. I'm so yeah. If you've seen Hydra, you're gonna feel a lot of similarities, because it's just him and Kensuke Sonomura just working together. Like the type of boxing and kind of fast Wing Chun-esque hand trapping that they created in Hydra. It's come over here, and I like how they implemented it into a taller versus a shorter fighter, because in Hydra it's just two men of equal stature and they're just kind of boxing at each other. In this movie, you can see how they're using the shorter height advantage that Sayori has. So she's really, really just ducking out of the way. And a lot of times it's Masamura Mimoto like almost just like punching right like above her back, because she's just ducking and trying to advance towards him while he's doing that.
Yeah. I mean, like we mentioned with Hydra before, like the clinch work is actually really good, and it's all. Of course, it's a movie, right? And I hate to always fall back on this, but there's a difference between cinematic martial arts and like real world martial arts. But it actually kind of blurs the line sometimes. It actually starts to incorporate things that is not too far fetched, or like hard to believe that you can actually do. Like in or you would see in an actual fight, some like the like fighting against the wall or the cage or whatever you want to call it. Some of that looks pretty like authentic for the most part. Like obviously some of it feels very choreographed and such, but or like looks super like theatrical. But for the most part, like the simple concepts like she gets hit in one eye, so she blocks it, so he decides to run towards the direction of where she's covering the eye, it becoms a blind spot for him. Like, oh, that's genius. And it's like a good visual storytelling.
And the way it's directed too, like you see the hand come up, they literally block half the screen. You see him go towards the side of the screen that's visually blocked. Like great direction.
Clever little filmmaking technique right there, and I like that a lot. And then like I said, like when they're fighting against the wall, just the fact he just starts pelting her with headbutts, and the camera pans down to show her foot placement on his his thigh so she could just push her off. I'm like, that's great. You know, like we need these little moments to tell the audience, you know, like how these characters are getting in and out of these predicaments. And like that's really good. Like especially if you're trying to tell the story to non-martial artists or people who don't have an eye for martial arts like us. So yeah, like it's a shame that this fight is in this movie. That's the way I look at it. And we said it before. It's a real shame that it ends the way that it does. So, Zero, how does it end?
Oh God! Wait, before that, I do wanna praise the fighting a little more. Yeah. So, God damn, like because it is like kind of boxing choreography, but they're jabbing and striking at a much higher pace. Yeah. There are so many combinations that both these performers had to memorize because we get these nice longer takes of them just boxing at each other, just trying to strike at the head and just weaving and ducking in and out of each other. There's this great kind of a downward shot where they are both trying to grab for their arms or their shoulders. Yeah. And it's just a constant exchange of them trying to like clinch each other or grab each other's hands or wrists to kind of do some manipulations. And it's just a back and forth of them pushing and pulling, trying to outmaneuver one another. It's all in one take, and it's so many different hand movements. I'm just so surprised that they were able to memorize like all these moves. It's extremely impressive.
Yeah. I don't know if any of this was sped up. It doesn't seem like it. It really does feel like they were naturally moving at that speed.
Yeah, I think so too.
Right. Yeah,
and then
it's good. Yeah.
But right before we get to the point when he blinds her in the eye, I don't know if you notice this. He does a fish hook on her her cheek. Literally pulls her, and it's a little hard to see, but when I was going frame by frame, you see his finger really is pulling her cheek.
In there, yeah.
And then he pulls the cheek, and then he pushes her away with a thumb to the eye. Obviously he didn't really do that, but in a fight, like it's kind of
it's considered dirty.
Yeah, it's really dirty, and it's gnarly that he does that to her.
Yeah. I generally like how Masanori Mimoto kind of incorporates a lot of different kind of martial arts in his fighting style. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of like boxing, but like there's a little bit of like Muay Thai as well, like Thai kickboxing, especially the way that he or even traditional karate style like side kick that he throws towards her, and then he just immediately goes into a Muay Thai style like leg check, like he keeps it up before he goes on with a barrage of attacks. Choreography is great. I actually really like it a lot, and then it gets to a point where she realizes, oh, I can't beat him. So what does she do? She pretends to run towards her gun. He chases after her. She turns around, headbutts him in the head, and then she gets her gun and shoots him to death.
Well, it is a jumping, flying headbutt, so it's not as simple as her just turning around and then bopping him on the head. She turns around and then kind of jumps at him, propelling her head towards his and then knocking him out. Yeah, not the best way to end a very, very technically complicated fight that we've been praising this whole time. Mm-hmm. Because that is so anticlimactic. Yep. I'm fine that she gets the gun and kills him because we know the whole time that's what they're setting up. But for her to be losing and that is her trump card is not... That doesn't let me sing her praise. Like,
you know what we needed? We needed him to be on the losing side. Then he pulls out something dirty. So her trump card will have to be the gun in order for her to win fairly. And not to say like every fight needs to be fair, but it's so anticlimactic watching this, and it actually feels like you're robbed of a fight scene that has any sort of like karma to it. There's nothing to that. It basically it feels like you're you watched there's no other way to put it. It's fucking anticlimactic. And then the final lady gets shot at the end, and then the movie's over. I mean, it doesn't end right away, but yeah, the movie's over.
That's Baby Assassins.
That's Baby Assassins. I mean, we kind of steamrolled through the movie. There's not enough content in it to really talk about in depth.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, though. Usually when we do our Patreon episodes, we kind of really go in depth with the story. And because this is not really a story you can even break down either, because we mentioned it earlier, this really is slice of life. It feels like you're really there in real time with these girls, and that's not always a bad thing. But when the movie does have the lull, like we were complaining about, it just really, really feels like you're going nowhere.
Yeah. So everything you said about the story is very true. So there's not enough to break down there. So consider this a freebie for anyone who's listening.
Yeah.
That we only broke down the 2 action scenes in it. And look, why is it that we're doing that with this movie versus like Hydra, which that has action as well, but like we broke that down in greater detail, and like also in Patreon section. But this one, even the action scenes, they're too short, and they're one of them ends so abruptly in a not cathartic way. That's the word I was looking for before. That it's like, might as well might as well just like talk about it relatively briefly. But I will say, I mean, go check out the final fight. That's it. I don't recommend the movie at all. I have very little to praise about this movie that's outside of the fighting. I really think that this movie will work better if it was animated, because what they're trying to go for the comedy and the storytelling would have worked better if it was a lot more visually interesting too, and if it was like paced a little bit better. The pacing might have been resolved if it weren't live action, because those static cameras are so fucking boring to look at. And I usually watch our movies more than once each time. The second time I was like, I cannot sit through this again. I have to skim through this. So Zero, what are your thoughts?
Right. I mean, I agree with you with everything. I'm a little more forgiving. I usually try to give a little context. I don't know. I think the actresses did a great job at portraying these like really weird, quirky characters, and I did like them, but the story was not doing it for me. So it's very hard to recommend. I think if you like Hydra and you like that fight scene, just watch the movie and sit through it, and you're going to understand what we're saying. But it's not something I could recommend because it's just it's not enjoyable to sit through.
Right.
There's a point, if you sit through it and you watch it, there's a point where the movie kind of takes a nosedive. You'll see it, you'll feel it happen, because it's just like, there's no there's no action happening, and you're just kind of with these girls, and they're not doing enough to keep my interest. So it's unfortunate. It's hard to recommend, but I can't really do it. But the action at the last action scene is good, minus how we said she defeats the villain. Yeah.
Well, disclaimer to anyone who's going to watch it: when you get to the maid cafe scene, you'd spend less time actually flying to Japan, getting to a maid cafe, getting your bill, and then coming home. That's how fucking long that scene is. I was laughing before because you're like, oh, if you liked Hydra and you really like the action in that, I thought you were about to say, just go watch Hydra.
Just go watch Hydra. I mean, go watch Hydra. It's fucking awesome. Amazing action from Kensuke Sonomura and Masamune Mimoto, and it's a movie that I will always highly praise.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because this movie, it feels like it wants to go in that direction, but I don't know. It tried to have its cake and eat it too, but ultimately it was left in the refrigerator.
Sure.